Working with Coach Elliott Baring, Lauren Crescenzo won her third Mid-South this past weekend in dominant fashion. Today, we're talking with Lauren and Elliott about how she trained to win this major 100-mile gravel race, the strategy and the tactics and the gear she used, what you can learn from her methodology, and what's next on the calendar for the LDC. Lauren, how are you, ma'am? Great to see you. Congratulations again on your win.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just back home in Atlanta right now, but yeah, feeling real good about the weekends. That was a lot of things came together for that one, and it was a great way to start off the privateer campaign because it was my first race as a solo privateer athlete, and yeah, it's been great working with Elliott, being a privateer. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you were the definitely the hands down favorite coming in, but just being the favorite and pulling off all the things you need to pull off to win a race are two different things, turns out. And yeah, Elliott's congrats to you also for being a part of this winning program, coming out swinging with second win of the year now for Miss Lauren. How are you? You are in Georgia now, correct?
I'm currently in Georgia. I'm here for the next 3 months. Long story. Long story. It's complicated.
And Elliott, how are you doing? You've been getting some miles in yourself, sometimes with Lauren, sometimes elsewhere. How are things with you?
Yeah, things are going really well. Getting ready for the season to start up here soon in a couple of weeks. And yeah, it's great having Lauren somewhat local so we can, get some rides together, do some mountain bike training, some gravel rides, all sorts of stuff. So definitely taking advantage of that while Lauren's still in Georgia.
Also, Elliott, congrats to you on your recent wedding. I'd like to think as a an Albuquerque boy, there's some Albuquerque magic involved
It's true.
in this particular podcast. Lauren, I saw you were doing some La Luz repeats.
I was at the wedding, yes. I was losing my marbles in
Listeners, La Luz is a very steep climb in the Sandia Mountains foothills. It's been a go-to for training for many years. I've never seen anybody do 5 of those suckers in a row, but I guess
I think
that's what Coach Elliott cooks up, and he tees them up, and you knock them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
So, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we'll actually talk about that later, how that kind of plays into Lauren's timeline for training because she was out in Albuquerque for our wedding, which was a couple weeks before Mid South, and she got a little bit of an altitude block in. So, yeah, we can chat about that as well.
Yes, listeners, again, we're going to hit 4 things here: training prep, strategy, and gear. Hear from Lauren on how the race went down, and then takeaways for Lauren, and then takeaways for you. Because while we unfortunately can't absorb Lauren's inherent skills through osmosis just by listening to her, we can learn a lot from what she and Elliott have to say about training best practices, which we absolutely can do ourselves, not to the same volume, not to the same intensity, but the general methodology can and absolutely does translate to the rest of us. Before we do, some quick announcements. If you're not already on the FasCat app, what are you waiting for? You can get a free month. Go to fastcatcoaching.com/app and sign up for a free first month. That includes unlimited training plans that scale to your available time to train, and our new CoachCat AI powered training technology, which gives you instant feedback analysis. You can request workouts. You can request changes to your schedule. Even ask, hey, CoachCat, what tires should I run for this gravel race or this road race? Also, we're on Strava. Of course, we're on Strava. Everybody's on Strava. If you join our Strava club and share screenshots from our FasCat app, we'll send you a FasCat t-shirt if you do it 5 times. If you do 20 posts, we've got a sweet Castelli FasCat jersey headed your way. So again, get on the program at fastcatcoaching.com/app for a free first month. All right, the Mid-South. The Mud South some years. This year it was a Dry South. For those of you unfamiliar, it is the unofficial season kickoff to the gravel scene. We've had a couple, early season races, Buzz and Waffle Ride, Arizona notably, and then the new Valley of the Tears. But the Mid South definitely is the biggest community party kickoff. It's like a 4-day festival of sorts. That's one of the reasons I love that event. It is like a lot of gravel. It's quite varied. It can be, 5 hours when dry. It could be winning times and like 6.5 hours when the clay rich soil gets wet and turns into quickcrete. Lauren has won this thing 3 times, so has a pretty good idea of like what it takes. But Lauren and Elliott, I want to hear from you guys what the training was, when the training started, because it was just more than a couple days ago that the foundation was laid. So, Coach, maybe you can take us through the kickoff of what Lauren's base looked like this year, and then Lauren, maybe you can chime in after on how that has differed from what you've done in the past, or if it's the same. So, what are the first ingredients into this Mud South cake?
Well,
Yeah.
first,
So,
corn. Sorry, I was garlic. Yeah.
What, say more?
I said first I was born.
Start with good parents. Start with good genes.
Yeah.
Okay, my kitchen is out of that. What else you got?
yeah. So, first we have Lauren, and then, we started kind of planning out the season. I guess it was like October, November. And, we're always kind of identifying the first target, which in this case was Mid-South. And we gave Lauren her appropriate time off for, the off season. And then we kind of identified when we would start things up, which was, I think, about the beginning of December, late November.
Yeah.
And fortunately, kind of funny, we had 16 weeks between base start to Mid-South, which being, a FasCat coach, 16 weeks of sweet spot, I was like, man, this is kind of perfect. So that kind of laid the timeline that we had to work with. And yeah, we started to plan things out. So we started with a pretty traditional base phase, which ultimately lasted about 11 weeks. And basically during this phase, all we were doing was like increasing the training load. So a lot of endurance miles, a lot of tempo, a lot of sweet spot, which I think differed a little bit from what Lauren has done in the past. However, knowing Lauren as an athlete, we knew that she responds really well to this type of work. So it didn't take much to kind of get things going with that.
And then, Lauren, are you, sorry to interject here, Lauren, are you doing all this outside, or are you having to do some of this inside? If you're starting in November through late January, where and how are you doing your base miles?
Right. Well, the great thing about living in Georgia for now is that Hotlanta, where I live in Atlanta, we call it Hotlanta because it gets so hot. So it's pretty temperate during the winter months. So I can usually get outside almost every day. The only days I'll ride the trainer is when it's like torrential downpours and like, I don't want to ruin my bike. But I try to go outside as much as I can. But yeah, I'll ride Watopia as needed on the trainer.
And then how about bike specificity? Are you on road bike, mountain bike, gravel bike, tandem e-bike? What's the
Oh yeah, tandem e-bike. No, I did all of my most of my winter training was on the gravel bike on my Factor Ostro. I would just put the road slicks, the high roads, Maxxis high roads, or the Ramblers, Maxxis Ramblers, if I was going to go do some grav.
okay?
But yeah, I would just like interchange the tires and whatever. And then I did some time on the mountain bike this winter because that's always a work in progress.
So listeners, you're probably where she's doing the Lifetime Grand Prix, which consists of both gravel races where she dominates and mountain bike races where she does very well, but there's probably still like a little bit of marginal gains to ek out.
I would call it a little bit more than marginal. I was new. Last year was my very first year, or it was my first mountain bike race I'd ever done. Literally ever. And before, maybe a few months before that was like the first actual mountain bike ride I'd ever gone on. Yeah. I was
So,
once a roadie, not a mountain biker.
so maybe a small taste of what others are experiencing when they join you in a gravel race for their very first time, of you kind of jumping in with people who've been racing mountain bikes as a profession for a while. But in any event, Elliot, when did the intensity get added in with, a target date of, second week of March for Mid South being a goal?
Yeah, so depends how you define intensity. We did a pretty key VO2 block, kind of starting in February.
Hmm.
And we decided to do it then for a variety of reasons. Um, I like doing VO2 blocks outside of racing because it allows you to focus solely on that block. They're very, very intense, and it just allows you to really focus on the quality of that. And then it allows you to give yourself quite the runway into the race season to really like rest and absorb and then see those adaptations potentially even a few weeks later. That's not something that like you're going to finish a VO2 block and then a week later you're like, oh man, like I got all the benefits of this. Like, no, like this is a few weeks later down the line when all of those are kind of sealed in. So we were pretty specific with the timing of that. So our VO2 block ended about a month out from Mid South, which we were pretty happy with the timing of. Um, with Lauren's, I guess you could say like kind of power profile and rider type, in addition to the more traditional base and the volume that she had put in, endurance and her ability to pedal hard for 5 hours at Mid South was not really a concern of mine or ours. We knew that this was something that she would do well at. And the fact that she's already a 2-time winner before this year's edition of the race kind of shows that.
So,
So
so
go
throw
ahead.
some numbers at us about like what sort of total volume in terms of hours uh, was going into the base phase and that VO2 phase, and then
Yeah.
like what are some like VO2 example workouts?
Yeah, definitely. So Um, for we can back up for the traditional base phase that ended up being about 11 weeks for Lauren, and we averaged about 19 hours a week during this phase. And then keep in mind that's going with total rest weeks included, rest weeks being 12 to 14 hours, things like that. So, peak volume that we saw during this phase was probably around 26, 27 hours, I think. So pretty high. So yeah, 11 weeks,
It's
lots of
like
volume.
it's like it's your job or something, Lauren.
I know, it's not my job. Oh, wait, it is.
Yeah. And like pretty notably, like we saw a big bump in training load starting the base period around 93, which is very impressive considering that that was after a 3-week off season. And that increased to about 133 during that time. So, um, yeah, that kind of gave us a pretty good, I guess you could say, aerobic kind of engine and foundation that we were happy with. That we were like, all right, now we can kind of transition to the intensity and start bringing in some VO2 to, sharpen up a little bit.
Sure. And training load for new listeners, that is a cumulative score of the training you've been doing. If you're a Training Peaks user, you can see chronic training load is a number people often reference, and if you're a FasCat app user, one of the 4 key metrics you can see on your daily snapshot is load. And for reference, anything over 100 is a lot.
Yes. I remember the goal what Elliott told me during the off season. He was like, Lauren, let's see how low we can get your CTL. And I was like, no.
Worked so hard to get that number up.
I was like, I just saw it plummeting. I was like, okay, trust the process. And yeah, I trusted it and it worked. Yeah.
Speaking of, we're all familiar with the concept of tapering leading into an event that you build up a big training load, and then you've got to back it off a little bit in
Mm-hmm.
order to let your body recuperate and overcompensate. What were the goals leading into Mid-South? And you did the Border Wars race ahead of Mid-South. So tell us about, Elliott, tell us about, what the strategy was for that number, that training load number, and then doing this Border Wars as a lower priority race ahead of Mid-South.
Yeah. So to kind of continue establishing that timeline, the VO2 block ended up finishing kind of mid to late February. We rested Lauren. About a week later, we had a local training race here in Georgia that Lauren did that, at least from the distance and the duration, represented Mid-South pretty well. It was 100 miles. Her finish time was a little over 5 hours. So we thought, hey, this is the perfect, low stress, no pressure, go do a local race, smash some numbers. You might not feel great, but we'll see how the numbers look. And then it's 3-4 weeks out from Mid-South. So then we can have a really, really good dress rehearsal and get an idea of how we're feeling. And then, have a good conversation of, okay, what do we want to do next? How are we feeling with the power? What do we need to work on? We have 3-4 weeks going into Mid-South to kind of continue to fine tune things. So we continue to see a rise in training load over throughout the VO2 block. It continued to go up. And then probably all the way until about a week or so out from Mid-South when we really started to taper. Ultimately, Lauren's training load got up to about 145. I think about a week, 10 days out from Mid-South. And then we were happy with that. And, we kind of chatted and, rested, did a bit of a taper, traveled out to Oklahoma, and then let it rip.
So, Lauren, tell me about Border Wars and your thoughts on doing, training races. Is this something that's, good for the confidence and good for training? Is it a distraction? Like what's, what are your thoughts on these in general? And then how did Border Wars serve a purpose for you ahead of Mid-South?
Right. Yeah. So for listeners who don't know what Border Wars is, it's a race that goes it's a race here in Georgia that goes across the border of Georgia to Alabama and then over the border back to Georgia. It's 100 miles, and a really strong local field shows up at Border Wars. I like doing races like this because at the end of the day, I just really love bike racing. So just being at the local events it's just fun. It's just a fun thing. It's more fun than just going out and ripping by myself. So it was good to be up there with the guys and do the whole dress rehearsal. I kind of used the whole event as a dress rehearsal, of privateer dress rehearsal. I was like, okay, this is like everything that I need to do to take care of, to just go through the script so that when I showed up at Mid-South, I wouldn't be surprised by anything. But yeah, it was I thought it was a great way to start the season. It gave me a little, confidence boost. I was like, okay, I have 5-hour power. I can still do this insane, massive power number for 5 hours. I have really good 5-hour power. I don't know. This might maybe my best of all in the power profile. It might be 5 hours.
Most people look at it like 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute. Lauren's like, am I better at 5 hours or 10 hours? Because I can win races at both distances. Yeah.
5. It has to be 5.
So what type of, you said you mentioned some things you were practicing doing a dry run as a privateer. What sort of things did that include? Or were you talking about like packing your nutrition or thinking about where you're going to refill bottles, or what were you practicing there in addition from Hulk smash for 5 hours?
Hulk smash. Some things I was really like running through. I went and I did a pre-ride the day before, and I got my bike dirty, and then I found a car wash in, in somewhere in Georgia, somewhere in the country. I found a car wash and was able to to rinse the bike, keep it ready. I just taking care of my own, just taking care of all of my own equipment. and just like all of my own nutrition and like eating and finding like a good Mexican restaurant to go to like the night before, and just like knowing the area, just like all the basic things, like, eating, sleeping, pre-riding, all those
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Yeah, and this is like we were talking at the top of the pod about, some things don't overlap like skill, but some things absolutely do overlap, and all those things you listed off are the type of things that the rest of us have to contend with, and there are many things that the FasCat coaches will talk about because they're easy to lose sight of if you're just thinking about just the training and the power. Then you get to the race, you're like, oh shoot, I haven't had dinner yet, and it's 10 p.m.
Yeah,
and I still need to work on my bike, and like, so just having a good workflow and methodology for making sure all the things are
right.
well,
Yeah, I was working
like
on.
knowing what the things are that you need to take care of, and then two, like take care of them.
Yeah, I was really just working on the methodology of being a privateer, um, just taking care of all of my own things and not relying on the team dynamic, and just being a grown up.
If we're going to talk about grown-up stuff, I'm absolutely out of my depth, but let's steer it back to bike racing where I feel a
All
bit
right,
more
back to bike
comfortable.
racing. You have to
And
do things
listeners,
like eating and sleeping, though.
Lauren raced professionally on the road for many years, and then was on a team for a few years. So that's the context that she is coming from
Right.
of having her job be just pedal the bicycle very quickly to taking care of all the other adult things. Dang it!
Adult things, I know.
How about now let's talk. Week of Mid-South. What, Lauren, are you talking with Elliott about in terms of course and equipment and nutrition and weather? Like where
Mhm.
are you asking him questions and where is he asking you questions? Because I've seen you at Mid-South, usually when you're coming blowing by me at some point in the day. Elliott, I haven't seen you out there so much. So there's like a give and take between what the athlete knows and what the coach knows. So what, Lauren,
Mhm.
let's start with you. What were you asking Elliott? And then Elliott, I'll ask you what you were asking Lauren as you're like working on the teamwork for this project.
Right. I would say a big thing that we discussed was the tire choice, because I kind of made that decision the night before the race. I wasn't sure if I was going to go with a slick or not, something like a semi slick. And that really just became a game time decision. But yeah, I discussed that a lot with Elliott. Um, what else?
Yeah, Elliott. One of Elliott's quotes on the
Mhm.
inevitable tire question I've
It's,
stolen and
it's a big
I quote all the
question.
time is the best tire for you is the one you feel most comfortable on. And so now
And
that's kind of like my go-to answer because I get asked that constantly. What do you feel most comfortable on? Is a full slick or something with a little bit of sidewall, or not sidewall, but like shoulder knob to it?
a full slick. I've won a lot of races on a full slick. So, I mean, it's fast. It's a real fast tire. Yeah, I ran the Maxxis Velocitas 40s. And the reason I did it was because the day before the race, I went out and pre-rode the most technical section of the course, Narnia, at mile
Mm-hmm.
40. And the guy I was with, Walter, at Factor, he was on a road bike. And then when I saw him ride that section on a road bike, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely doing slicks. And then I called Elliott and like I told him the whole story, and he's like, yeah, slicks.
Yeah. Yeah. And in what width? Because I'm sure everybody wants to know exactly what you were on.
Yeah, it was the 40s, the 40 Velocitas, because I wanted to have some room for mud clearance, uh, just in case, because you never know what you're going to get, like with the red clay and the water crossing at mile 13. I didn't know what would happen when I went straight through the water.
Yeah, I saw Payson who's won it also 3 times. I want to say at least two. I'm pretty sure he's won it
Three
3 times.
times, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and he put a foot down in pre-ride, and he's one of these guys that runs road setup on the gravel all the time. Put a foot
Hmm.
down and could not get it back in for the rest of the day. So he's like, tomorrow I've got to treat it like it's the whole course is hot lava. I can't put a foot down because if I do, I'm
Don't
never
put a foot
getting
down.
it. And
Never put
like
a
I said,
foot
this
down.
was a dry year, but there's like 2 spots with water. But yeah, quick creedy mud it is out there.
Yeah, yeah.
How
I just went straight through the water. I think we can talk about the course, but yeah, that was also a game time decision. Elliot and I discussed that the night before, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's hard to decide. It's hard to decide what you're going to do when
in the
you
moment.
can't because it's a moment decision. Like it depends on what everyone else around you is doing. Like you can't go take the A line when there's like 20 people like walking the A line, and then you can't go through the water if everyone just fell in. I don't know if everyone just fell in the water, or
Sure.
if it's a bad line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, listeners, there's 100 miles. There's a creek crossing at mile 14-ish or so,
yeah,
and
13,
it's
14.
rideable, but you're going to probably you know injure your bottom bracket, and your chain's going to be a hot mess for the rest of the day. And there's a small chance that you could like hit a deep hole and like go over the bars. And then there's a line to the left, like you go up on the grass, and everybody lines up like you're in line to pay at the gas station or whatever, and that could take
Mhm.
quite some time. And depending on the size of the group, if there's 10 people, it's quick. If there's still 2,000 people, that could take quite some time.
A long time. Mm-hmm.
But then before you even get there, there's decisions to be made on like which, whose wheels do you follow? How far up do you want to be? What is your thinking going into the first part of the race? Like, are you looking at other women to make sure
Mm-hmm.
you know where they are, or is it just a matter of like, I want to keep myself near the front but not on the front? What is your strategy?
Right. So having won this race the 2 years before, I know how the beginning of the race plays out, and that's usually where I'm able to get away from my competitors, because it's just really, really hard. Like the rollers are just like so punchy. It's like you're doing 400 watts, 500 watts, and then coming down, then 500 watts, and then coming down. So yeah, it's just like back to back, like punchy climbs. And it's the group. That's when, the group is all together, the mass start. So it's all about staying with the fastest people, fastest guys that you can. And I knew that going in, that would be the hardest hour of the race. And it definitely was. Um,
That was absolutely my experience. I was telling Elliot just before we started recording here that I had in my head, oh, it's not going to be crosswindy like last year. Should be able to sit in okay. And then, yeah, 700-watt punch in the face
yeah,
after 700-watt punch in the
there's
face.
no sitting in there. There is
Yeah.
no group. There's no sitting in.
After a while, I was like, there goes Lauren. And I want to be there, but I'm no longer able to be there. And yeah,
Oh
the
yeah,
wheat is separated from the chaff, and then the in some ways that makes tactics a little bit easier.
that
Uh,
was. Yeah, I
but
mean, it was chaos. That first hour was so chaotic with like the dust, and I was being so close to everyone and not being able to see. And
another thing we were talking about on the FasCat company call earlier was, how do you practice? We're big proponents of doing simulation rides ahead of gravel races, right? Go out, practice, practice, practice.
oh yeah,
Practice the distance, practice the efforts, practice the bike, practice the tires, practice all the things. And practicing being in the chaos of 1,000 chuckleheads all charging into low light dust, can't see a thing. Like, it's, unless you're doing an event, like how the heck do you practice that?
I don't know where to go. I can't think of any group rides that do that.
So in some ways, that's a, you just got to go, and like racing's the best training type of scenario.
And that's the reason that we raced Border Wars 3 weeks before, because I mean the group wasn't quite as big, but it was similar terrain, and the group dynamic was fairly similar. Yeah.
We also
How,
had the very key group ride of Airport as well.
Yes.
That has a lot of absolute chaos. So, Ben, Airport is I guess,
we call it
Atlanta
we call it
Scareport.
Scareport. We call it Scareport.
Skip.
Like scary. Yeah.
I do it about once a year for a very good reason. Yes. But anyway, we decided to we did the group ride Airport, which was a week or a few weeks before Border Wars, to kind of like, all right, let's get in this pack mentality, get the handling skills back, make sure that we're comfortable moving in and out of the pack, get a lot of unstructured high intensity. And that was a good prep for
Mhm.
the dress rehearsal, which was Border Wars. And then Border Wars, gravel race, mass start, mixed in. And yeah, both of those I think provided
Yeah.
a good refresher of that essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was very helpful doing that scary group ride a week before the pre-dress rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I felt a lot more confident going into that first race.
Elliott, what were you asking Lauren ahead of time about her past experiences with Mid South as you were helping her prepare?
Yeah, a lot of it was, kind of asking her how the race played out last year and years prior because I want to hear her perception of that because a power file can only tell me so much, and I was looking at the power file from last year, but in a race like Mid South with no, the terrain is not overly defining, I guess, in a way like a very mountainous race might be. It's easy to pick things out and stuff like that. But, I'm asking her about the course since the course was the same as last year. Where are the pinch points? Where did you get separation? Things like that. Um, that was a lot of the things. Those were a lot of the things that I was asking Lauren. And then in addition to dialing the taper week, because an
Mhm.
athlete like Lauren is very in touch with how she is feeling that week and really knows what she needs. So I'm relying on her feedback probably more so than what I'm going to put into my training peaks and that or my training peaks for her. And that might be something that would differ between an athlete like Lauren and then kind of like an amateur or more of a recreational athlete. So there was a lot of back and forth communication that week about, navigating the travel. And we had some weather in Atlanta. So like we had to kind of like flip some days because she ended up being on the trainer. Um, and then kind of determining how we handle the course recon on Thursday and, just kind of all of the juggling and ultimately, I think it ended up being less of a like very strict prescription of like, hey, this is the exact ride that I want you to do. This is the power I want you to be at. These are the intervals I want you to do for openers. It was more loose and it was like, hey, this is the goal of today. I want you to go recon course, try to keep it as light as you can, but include a couple of openers or maybe hit the single track section hard so you can hit that at speed. It's funny sometimes how when you get to that really top level, sometimes things get very simple, whereas you would expect them to get very complicated. Um, Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Speaking of seemingly simple things that can get complicated for some of us, how about nutrition and clothing? What were the plans there as far as what to eat and when, and then even dressing? Like I didn't see you at the start,
Mhm.
Lauren, so I don't know if you were one of those that like goes with the schemo saying of "Be bold, start cold." Like I saw like Deanna Males started just the way she finished, short sleeve jersey, bibs, that's it. Whereas some folks started with layers and peeled as they go.
Right.
So nutrition, what was the nutrition plan? What was the clothing plan for a day that started like in the like 42 degrees at the start, finished at like 62 degrees?
Yeah. So Elliot and I actually discussed this the night before the race, and it's called functional underdressing. I
Yes, I know
yes,
I'm shivering. That's the plan. I'm
that's
planning to
the
be shivering.
plan. That is the plan. I functionally underdressed race morning, and I started in just exactly what I finished in, just bibs and a jersey.
Hmm.
Because waiting on my race kit. My race kit is being sent from the Castelli factory right now to my house, but it did not arrive in time for Mid South, so I just did it in bibs and a jersey. But yeah, that was a big question mark in my head because 42 degrees, it's quite, it's cold, but like race morning when like the air just didn't feel as cold as I thought it would be at 42 degrees. Maybe I was just nervous.
And then are you able to hand a jacket off to like Walter from Factor or something like this? Like as a privateer, do you have a buddy to do the start line
Yeah,
jacket handoff?
actually, funny story
Mom.
about. Yeah. My
Mom,
mom was there. My mom drove from
the,
Colorado to come hang out with me.
the best buddy of all.
She was like, it was part of the privateer plan. My mom is either going to come with me, or maybe my dad, or maybe my brother Eddie.
full family effort.
It's a full Crescenzo effort. So yeah, my mom was there. I actually stayed with my mom at a hotel, and yeah, got some good mommy daughter time that that weekend.
At Mid-South, there's a few different aid stations, but the main one for the 100-miler is at 50.
Yeah, my mom was there.
Was okay. And what
and so
is mom?
And so was Walter. So was Walter.
And what were mom and Walter armed with to hand up?
Right.
We're talking a fresh hydration pack, 2 tall boy bottles, a BLT, a pepperoni pizza. What's in the feed zone?
So that was actually another thing I had to decide if I would start with the Usui pack, the Camelback, or just 2 1-liter bottles. And it was 42 degrees, so I ended up deciding to just go with 2 1-liter bottles and getting 2 smaller bottles in the feed zone after I'd had those 2, and I filled those with like a lot of carbs, lots of carbs. I filled it with Never Second, the C30, 3 scoops per bottle, so 90 grams of carbs per bottle. There's a lot, and yeah, had all that by the feed zone, as well as all the snacks in my pocket. Had about half of them. I carried all of my nutrition with me because I don't like taking nutrition feeds. I just like taking like hydration and not food, because it's too much. Too many things.
Yeah, and you're coming through there. I mean, that was a pretty fast, paved section of the course. So, yeah, the more things you're trying to grab, the more things can go wrong.
Yeah. So Walter just handed me a musette with the 2 like 24-ounce bottles, and I was able to get both of those in. But yeah, in terms of the food, I've really been liking that it's the beta SIS beta fuel. I really like those gels as well as the chews. That's 41 grams of carbs in the gels, and then 45 in like a pack of the chews. So like, I just like being able to eat as many carbs as possible at one time, because I'm not always thinking about it.
I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
The feed zones is something I screw up a lot of things, and often learn how this podcast works is I'm the bad example of like the cautionary tale. Don't do what Ben does. And then people like yourself, it's like, this is how I do it. So, at both, Leadville and Mid-South, I've gone through the entire feed zone looking for my homies, not finding them, and then turned around and like swam upstream, like, where Marco Polo, like looking for the bottles. That's to say, in your pre-race chats with mom and or Walter, do you guys map out where you're going to be? Is that part of your recon ride, or is that something done on race morning? Or how do you coordinate when you're coming in at 25 miles an hour and there's people screaming, bottles going everywhere? Like, how do you find your people?
That was something that I messed up that I should have discussed with them. I just said, go to the town of Prix and you'll see me. And
okay, so see, you're human. You do it like I do, which is like, yeah, it'll work out. And then you're like, oh, it's not working out.
You'll see me probably. So like,
I'll be the one off the front by myself, so it'll be easy.
Yeah. So I was like just looking like really closely at every single person, and eventually, like, I don't even think they knew I was coming, because they got a time split that said I would be like, I don't know, 5 minutes later. So I was yelling at them. I was like, Walter, Mom! Like, I had to find them and like scream in their face.
Just sitting there reading the newspaper.
Basically, yeah. I don't know what they were doing in the feed zone.
So tell us about how the race went down. You've won in dominant fashion 3 years running. The last time I saw you was mile 10 or something, when you were in the group that was maybe 60 people or so at this point, riding off into the dust. How long were you with a group of that size? How did the race play out?
Right. The group did not stay that big. So yeah, it was never a group of 60. But yeah, how'd the race play out? So I guess we already talked about the beginning. It was extra super hard, and that's where all the women got split up in the mass start. It was just one by one, like I would be able to pass another one of my competitors. And then by the time I had I was like the last survivor, I feel like, of that section, the final
Oh, you
survivor.
definitely were. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
more like just a survival game in that first section, as it always is. And then when I got to the water crossing at mile 13, I saw like a whole bunch of guys just like all clogged up on the like the alt line on the
Yep.
side. So in the moment, I decided I'm just gonna ride through the water. I almost took myself out, but I kept up because like in the water there's like a big dip, like you like fall off the cement. So like I fell off some cement, kept it upright somehow, and I was able to pass all those guys.
There's a reason why all the photographers queue up there. It's like waiting for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I know, and I almost let them have it, but the photo, but I didn't let them have that photo. So, I mean, in that section, I was able to pass like a ton of people, like just guys like from the lead group and the second group. But after that, after the crossing, it's a big climb. So, or a bigger climb for the course.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the first group was established and the second group of guys was established. And I made the second group of guys. And we just rolled like that. And, I was taking some pretty heavy pulls and just trying to to get all the troops aligned. I was like, come on, guys, let's go. Let's get organized. Let's roll fast and let's do it, guys. And we were able to roll like that for a while. We went through the Narnia section. It wasn't as gnar as they were making it seem. As I said, Walter rode a road bike through it. It's at mile 40. It was like the most technical section on the course, I think. But yeah, rode through there probably with like, the group was probably like 15 men at that point in the second group. And yeah, I was rolling through the pace line with them the whole time, doing my part. And then it actually split, like got completely splintered at mile. Oh, and then there was a feed zone at mile 50, and I yelled at my mom and Walter. What are you guys doing? And yeah, that was at mile 50, but that was like a nice little respite on the road, like for maybe like 2 miles. And then, I actually got a little separated from the group I was in, but was able to, put some power down on the pavement and catch them after I messed up the feed. And then it was around mile 82. We were just riding along, and then all of a sudden I stopped moving, and the guy in front of me saw me, we hit like the sands, like some sand that did not expect at all. I was not expecting a
like
giant
fresh sand across the entire road, right?
Yeah, it was like a beach. It was like a beachfront or something. And I was like, what? So like I had to get going again, but like our whole group was just like all over the road. So that's like where that group died, is on the sand section. And I rolled by myself. I was just like catching people that had like come off and hit the single track. I hit the single track solo. And just had to get around all like the 50 milers and everything. And I was like, just doing my thing. And then after I exited the single track, I was pretty sure I had it like in the bag. But despite knowing that, I still went into time trial mode and went as fast as I possibly could, just in case.
Yeah,
because you can never be too sure.
Yeah, I was
can
going
never
to ask. I was going to ask you like what your awareness was of what was coming behind, because I was in a group with what ended up being, I don't know, 8 or 10 women, like Sarah Stern, Whitney Allison, Cecily Decker, etc.
Mhm.
And as that group would coalesce, they're all asking each other like, "Who's up the road? Who's up the road?" And even until we came into the finish, it was our understanding that it was just you in the women's race, and then this group of women were going for second, but there was actually a woman in between. So, like, how much awareness
Mhm.
do you have of who is behind you and how far? Like,
No
is
idea.
does Walter's not giving you like a NASA readout on all your competitors?
Walter didn't even know where I was. No one knows no one knew what was going on. I tried to ask the follow car, like the car that was recording everything, like the men's race and our race.
Yes,
I was like,
yes.
"What's the split, guys?" And they told me 2 minutes, and that was maybe halfway through the race. And I was like, "That doesn't seem right." But yeah,
What
it's hard with these races to know where everyone is.
as as an amateur, I appreciate the fact that we can all race most of the time. I appreciate the fact that we can all race together because it's fun to see different people, and it's not just like old school USCF racing where you're racing the same 20 people in the same group over and over and over. But I can very much appreciate for those of you who are actually racing the thing, that's not necessarily a fun thing.
No.
Where do you net out? If you had your druthers, would all gravel races be like what the lifetime formula is, where the elites have their own start and like the women have their own start, or do you prefer that everybody's all in it together?
I've been on the calls with Lifetime, and I absolutely want our own start. And we've actually been discussing drafting rules. It's going to be illegal this year for the women to draft off men, and you guys to draft off of us, off of like the us in the Lifetime Grand Prix and the elite women. Yeah, I really prefer our own start. There's so much less chaos. You know who you're racing. It's like it. When you're doing it for your job, you want to have like a real race and not just not know what's going on and where people are and who you're racing. And yeah, so yeah, I'm really excited about the Lifetime format, that we have our own start at every single race. And I'm
And,
interested to see how
and
this drafting thing plays out.
I was gonna say, like, one, like, I've got two thoughts. One, how is that going to be enforced? And two, like, what do you mean I can't sit on anymore? Dang it! Like, that's
No,
been one
get
of my
away.
go-to strategies.
Let's get off my wheel.
Ah, dang it!
No, I mean, having been like a roadie for all these years, I like a women's race.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yeah,
And to be clear, this is for the the big time races, the Lifetime Grand Prix races,
the
and
big boys.
smaller events will, I presume, not that I have a crystal ball, but I presume those will continue to be a mass start thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
lest anyone be upset that the spirit of gravel is being tainted and killed. Like, no, it's just further, fine tuning of the sport as it gets
It's just bike racing.
bigger and better and faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Elliot, throw some numbers at us. I was just looking at like finished times at Mid South, how they've gotten progressively faster and faster. What sort of numbers were you looking at in Lauren's file for Mid South 2024?
Yeah. So Lauren made an interesting comment actually, that despite the fact that she won by nearly 7 minutes, new course record by nearly 7 minutes, that she actually thought the course was slower this year, which I thought was very, I guess, impressive, and also just showed how strong of a ride Lauren had.
So 4 hours 47 minutes, 100 miles and change, and yeah, a lot of
21
sand.
average. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I look at Lauren's race file, I'm looking at a lot of things. I'm looking at some of the peak numbers towards the beginning of the race, because that kind of indicates how hard it is. And, looking at a lot of these, like, repeated 500 plus watt surges. But then I'm comparing, the first hour of this and comparing that to the last hour of the race and seeing, what's the difference. Lauren has a phenomenal aerobic engine and is very resilient and resistant to fatigue and is very durable. So we don't see a lot of drop in power over the duration of the race. And
Lauren's
you can
5 hour
actually,
energy doesn't come in a little canister. That's not.
you can't
Yeah.
buy it on shelves.
There's something called 5 hour energy, but this is something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because you can see that correlated directly to the splits that she puts into her competitors. So I was looking earlier today at the splits between Lauren and then the group of riders in second and third. And all the way up until about mile 50 at the aid, it was about a 2-minute gap, at least for the times that we had splits. At mile 88, it was a 5-minute gap. And then at the finish, it was a 7-minute gap nearly. So in the last 12 miles of racing, Lauren nearly put 2 minutes into those competitors, which is
And to be clear,
huge.
Lauren, you said you were solo coming out of the single track, yes?
Yes. I was solo, head down, TT mode in my happy place.
And so I don't know. I since we were unaware that there was a woman in second place, I don't know what her configuration was in terms of the group size, but the rest of the women, Sturmy and a couple others came out of the single track clear because that was like an opportunity to get some time on like the more roadie centric, like the Emily Newsoms, etc. But then that group was chasing hard to get back up to the Sturm group, and so it ended up being a group of again like 9 women, and then another like 10 of us men hanging on. So like a group of 20 is what I'm trying to say,
Right.
roughly, from that single track section to the finish, chasing, and you grew your gap there.
Well, and this was also something that was evident in the data because now, unrestrained from the group of riders that Lauren was with, she actually increased her power in the last 30 minutes of the race, so the exit of the single track to the finish. And she bumped her power up to about 275 watts for the last 30 minutes, which was an increase in power above her average power for the race. And yeah, I mean, that's just like that late in the race to be increasing your power like that is pretty impressive. Phenomenal, I would say, even. And yeah, it showed with a course record 7+ minutes on, second and third.
Now, listeners, Coach Elliott has done a pretty detailed breakdown and analysis with a lot of the data on site, so you can check that out, FasCatCoaching.com. But Elliott, give us a couple more numbers, like what was average power, and what does that translate to in watts per kilo for the day for this whole effort?
Yeah, so the entire race, we'll use normalized power. Normalized power was 260 watts. That's about 4.3 watts per kilo for Lauren, and then 87% of threshold, which for that duration is pretty dang high. The peak hour power was about the first hour of racing, and that was 290. So yeah, you might not know these numbers, Lauren. So it was about 290, almost 5 watts per kilo. And yeah, first hour, it started at about 13 minutes in. So after, maybe a little bit of a neutral rollout.
Yeah. So listeners, that's all you got to do. 5 watts per kilos for an hour, and then settle into 4.3 for the
for the final four.
Next four. And then ramp it up at the end.
Yeah. Additionally, very impressive. A lot of people think gravel racing is just like, all right, sit it, tempo, sweet spot, and just hold it as long as you can, and just let the power, kind of drop.
Like triathlon on a bad surface.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to be successful in this discipline, you need both. You need the ability to do repeated high intensity efforts, and you also need to be able to hold 80-90% of your threshold power for 5 hours. So interestingly, not surprisingly, Lauren had nearly an hour of this race. So 20% of this race was spent over 105% of her threshold. So that's a huge chunk of this race. And it shows that in addition to her really well-developed aerobic engine and foundation, that she also has a really high anaerobic capacity and the ability to repeat that. And it does not take away from her ability to ride. She's very efficient. She does well at fueling, and she's able to keep that up. So yeah, it's dangerous.
It is dangerous, quite effective. With that, an hour over 105% of threshold. How specific were you guys in your VO2 intervals ahead of time? Did it get down, like if you're doing a hill climb or something, you might be doing efforts to mimic, the big climb of the day. When you've got a whole mess of rude rollers at the start, are you doing, like in that VO2 block, are you doing efforts of that expected duration? Like how granular do you get in terms of trying to mimic a course versus just establishing a good overall fitness to cover your bases?
Yeah, we weren't necessarily aiming for that's a huge effort, and we're talking about cumulative time spent over threshold, not an hour sustained of over 105% of threshold. That math doesn't shake out.
Understood.
But yeah, we weren't really aiming for that as much because that's a huge ask. That's nearly an hour of VO2 work, which
I'm sorry. I just meant like for the to do a 30-second effort or a 1 minute effort, because that's how long it'll take to get over these rollers. Like, were you doing those types of efforts, not shooting to do 100, not trying to do like an hour over a threshold? Sorry.
Yeah. Work I remember doing were those 20-40s, 40-20s.
40-20s.
Those are,
yeah. So
really good.
when we were discussing the VO2 block, I actually kind of pitched it to Lauren to decide kind of which variation she wanted. Did she want to go kind of the more, quote, traditional route with like 3-minute VO2 intervals, or did she want to go kind of the more Tabata style, so on off? And either are still accomplishing the goal of getting the VO2 max, stimulus that we're looking for. But Lauren actually preferred to do the Tabata style, the on off. So we used that progression. So kind of started with 30-30s, progressed up to 40-20s. And then we're kind of racking up some time in that zone. And, we're still getting the VO2 work in, but yeah, maybe that kind of played into Mid-South a little bit because it has it has a lot of short, punchy rollers that are in that duration. So
it felt like Tabatas, like they just, like you just get done with one. It's like, no, just let me recover. There was no recovery.
Yeah, that was like the first hour was like an hour of 40-20s. So I thought that was great prep.
So like that could have been that was not a planned goal of that VO2 block. It simply just came down to Lauren's preference when we made that decision, but that could have just been an unintended benefit that we got, which worked out.
Yes, Frank's whole crying the dojo to laugh on the battlefield. That was Lauren's asking for just mean workouts.
No, I told Elliott my least favorite interval of every interval ever are 3-minute intervals. I just hate them. Oh, don't tell my competitors, so I hope no one's listening.
I think we still gave you a couple of them.
Yeah,
I know. I do it, but I'm like, I hate these. God. I prefer the Tabatas. I don't know.
Wow. See, I kind of like the 3-minute intervals specifically because the first minute of the interval, you kind of just go full gas. The middle of it, you kind of settle in and you suffer a little bit. And then you're like, oh, I have 1 minute left. And you just go full gas again, and then it's over.
To each their own. To each their own.
I've got a 4-minute interval. That's different.
Yeah, that's not good either.
That's like Ashton Lambie territory. No man's land.
Yeah.
Uh, Two more questions for you folks. I appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun chatting about this. Lauren, for you, what are your takeaways from this race heading into the rest of your season? Like, what's giving you confidence? What are you
Mhm.
going to work on? Like, where's your head at coming out of your third win at the Mid South?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, it was a great like confidence boost that everything is going according to plan in this new LDC privateer life. I was, having a little bit of anxiety leading into the race, thinking like I've always been on a team or in a team dynamic for like most of my cycling career, and I've never had to take care of everything like on my own. I mean, I have great sponsors, like I had great support by like Factor and the feed and everyone, but like I'm really just like at the end of the day, it's just me doing Lauren things. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was good to, and Elliot and I had just started together like this year, and I knew I was fit, but it was great to put it to the test and like improve, having improved upon like the last year and the year before, and yeah, still getting better at cycling. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And when
Yeah,
you're starting
so
from winning a lot, yeah, those increased gains get harder and harder, I would imagine. So yeah,
they
congratulations
do.
again.
Thank you. Yeah, no, yeah, feeling good. And yeah, things I need to work on. Elliot and I will continue to do this mountain bike stuff. It takes time though. It's just time on the bike and just riding the mountain bike.
Before you ride, or at least before you race mountain bike at Sea Otter El
Yeah.
Fuego, you're doing Levi's new monster road race.
Oh yeah.
When's the last time you raced a road bike?
Tour of the Gila. Oh no, Nationals.
Oh,
Nationals.
okay.
In 2022. That was my
Okay.
last road. That was my last road ride.
That'll be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
excited for that one.
yeah, yeah. Good luck,
Thank
Elliot.
you.
Elliot, for you, what are the takeaways that the rest of us can glean from Lauren's experience and your experience coaching Lauren through prepping and racing Mid South?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think as we like to say it, like the takeaways for us average Joes are, when you have a coach that understands you and understands your goals and really, takes the time to look into those and, plan everything out, you can come away with a really well structured program and you can, absolutely crush those. And I think that, when you look at, an athlete like Lauren, it is a really good example of that. It is the 1%, it is the extreme. However, it shows you that if you are an athlete that follows the plan and looks into the details and does your homework of, what tires am I going to ride? What's my nutrition strategy? What's my course analysis, things like that, yeah, you can knock out your goals and you can accomplish, what you're working towards.
And the numbers are still all trackable. The numbers might be smaller, whether that's amount of time to train. We're probably not notching 26-hour training blocks, and we're probably not holding 4.3 for 5 hours. But you can track, what your training load is, and then have that modulated to ramp up and then taper down leading into your events, and
Yeah.
all that 20 plus years of coaching practices built into all the training plans in the FasCat app. And so getting those plus the customization and the personal hands-on back and forth touch with working with a coach is something that absolutely works for everybody regardless of where you are.
Yeah, we were, chatting about it earlier. There's nothing really that special about, the principles and the theories and everything that we apply. It's all just sport physiology science. And, what makes the difference here is the fact that Lauren is a phenomenal athlete. Um, all of the principles and everything are the same, whether you're, Lauren, or whether you're, just trying to, you know, compete to get to the finish line of Mid-South. We're still going to apply that, and it just might scale differently, and it is a different, relative effort. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that the human body just responds pretty much the same. I don't know. I think it's just the human body and its basic physiology. And, I mean, it's been awesome, working with Elliott this year. Just like beyond just the coaching, just because I've been friends with Elliott we've been friends for a few years, and it's great to have like the personal touch with things and just like feel like you're calling up your friend. And it's great working with someone that and it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, having someone you can trust to bounce ideas off of. It's interesting that not just elite level athletes have coaches, but often coaches have coaches, just like within the FasCat sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you know something, having that third party either keep you in check or challenge you or just hold you accountable is an asset, regardless of
Definitely
skill or experience level.
I never want to coach myself. I don't trust myself to coach myself.
Well, you're in good hands with Elliott.
Yes.
Well, Lauren Crescenzo, winner once again of the Mid-South, and winner, I'm suspecting, of a few more gravel races on the 2024 calendar year. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been great.
Thanks, Coach Elliott. We'll talk to you guys
Elliott.
See you guys next time.
And that's all for us, folks. Thanks for listening, and we will speak to you next week.